Why do we dream? Every night, without planning or permission, the brain constructs elaborate stories, feelings, and sensations out of nothing. It doesn't matter if you're a Nobel Prize winner or someone who thinks REM is just an old band. When you fall asleep, the same strange thing happens. Your brain starts making things up, and you have no say in it. Dreams are so normal, we forget how bizarre they are. Flying through buildings, running through treacle, shouting at a goose that's turned into your maths teacher. None of it real, and yet somehow absolutely convincing at the time. The line between the believable and the absurd dissolves, and your brain just nods along like it all makes perfect sense. Tonight, we'll explore the science behind that mystery. What's happening inside the brain during a dream? Which parts switch on? Which parts shut off? Is dreaming just leftover mental noise, or does it serve some actual purpose? And the big one, do dreams mean anything? Or are they just what happens when a bored brain starts improvising with no audience? We'll trace the dream experience from your own bed to deep inside your brain, and further still, through millions of years of evolution, ancient civilizations scribbling symbols about their nightmares, and modern neuroscience labs full of people paid to stare at sleeping volunteers and take notes. Quite a job, really. Imagine explaining that at a family wedding. Along the way, we'll look at how dreams connect to memory, emotion, biology, and maybe even quantum physics. Although don't worry, we'll explain that gently. And we'll step far back, beyond the brain, beyond the planet, into the vast, unbothered universe, where dreams are just one more strange thing matter happens to do when organized into a human being. The goal is not to decode every last dream. There's no quiz at the end, no secret message from your subconscious about why you keep dreaming about buses. Instead, it's to understand the mechanisms and processes that make dreaming possible. To learn what science can say about a phenomenon that's deeply personal and yet totally universal. Of course, the universe doesn't care that we dream. Stars explode, black holes spin, and somewhere a giraffe is asleep too, twitching slightly while it dreams about running or salad. But here we are, wondering anyway. And that wondering, that curiosity, is what makes us human. This leads us to consider the question more clearly. If everyone dreams, and dreams follow patterns, what exactly are they? And what is the brain doing when it dreams? Every night, while the body rests, the brain becomes oddly busy. It builds stories from fragments, mixes emotion with memory, and churns out strange scenes that often make no sense in the light of day. And so the question remains, quietly persistent: how do dreams work? Not just why they happen, but what's the mechanism behind them? It's a question that's puzzled thinkers for thousands of years. From ancient priests and poets to modern neuroscientists and sleep technicians, people have tried to explain why the brain behaves like this. Why does it produce vivid experiences during sleep? Why do they feel so real at the time, only to vanish moments after waking? And what are they actually for, if anything? The trouble is, dreams are slippery. You can't bottle one, measure it directly, or replay it exactly as it was. They're subjective, different for every person, every night. One person might dream of swimming in a bowl of soup. Another might relive a stressful maths exam from 6 years ago. It's not always clear what connects the two, unless soup-based algebra is more common than we thought. And yet, despite all that messiness, patterns do emerge. Most dreaming happens during a stage of sleep known as REM, rapid eye movement. Certain parts of the brain light up consistently. There's a general logic to how dreams unfold, how they feel, and how they follow sleep cycles. So even if we can't record a dream like a video, we can study the process that creates it. Some scientists argue that dreams are a kind of emotional maintenance, a way of sorting through feelings and experiences from the day. Others think they help store memories, or prepare us for future challenges. And some say dreams are just noise, a side effect of the brain doing other things. Like your computer making fan noises because it's trying to update your printer driver again. The real answer might lie somewhere in between, or somewhere we haven't looked yet. Understanding dreams means examining not just the sleeping brain, but the evolution of consciousness itself. It means asking how and why a clump of biological tissue develops the ability to simulate experiences without any outside input. What we do know is that dreams don't happen randomly. They follow biological rhythms, depend on brain structures, and reflect inner experiences. They might not be messages from the beyond, but they're also not meaningless chaos. They're part of a complex, ongoing process, one we're only just beginning to understand. This leads us to consider the most immediate connection, your own experience. Because if we're going to understand how dreams work, we should begin with the person who has them. Every night, without fail. You've had dreams before. Hundreds, probably thousands. Some that made you laugh, others that left you confused, and the occasional one that was so odd, it made you question what on earth your brain thought it was doing. It's one of the few things every human shares. The experience of being asleep, yet convinced that you're wide awake in a world made entirely from guesswork. Maybe you've dreamt of missing a train that doesn't exist, or trying to run but your legs won't move. Maybe you've had that one where your teeth fall out, or the one where you're giving a presentation in your pajamas. You wake up thinking, well, that was weird, and carry on like your brain didn't just serve up a short film with absolutely no budget and even less logic. And yet, in the moment, it feels real. Dreams often come with strong emotions, fear, joy, embarrassment, that linger well into the morning. You might wake up relieved that it wasn't true, or annoyed that it wasn't. Even when the details fade, that emotional residue sticks around, like the scent of something you can't quite place. What's more strange is how quickly it all slips away. You could have a vivid dream at 3 a.m., and by breakfast, it's gone. This isn't because the dream wasn't real. Your brain genuinely created those experiences. But the way we store and retrieve memories during sleep is different, and most dreams are simply not logged in long-term memory. Still, certain themes repeat. People often dream about being chased, falling, being late, or facing awkward situations. These patterns are surprisingly consistent across cultures, suggesting that dreaming taps into something deeply human. Which does make you wonder what it says about us, that we all seem to have anxiety about public speaking, timekeeping, and being naked in the wrong room. Despite how familiar it all feels, most of us have very little control over what happens in a dream. You don't choose the plot, the setting, or even the version of yourself that appears. It's like being the lead actor in a play written by someone who doesn't particularly like you and has a limited grasp of narrative structure. What you do have is the experience, the immersive, emotional, often surreal ride through made-up situations. And that's where our investigation begins. Because if your brain is creating all this from scratch each night, we have to ask, what's it using to do it, and how does it pull it off so convincingly? This leads us to consider what can actually be observed from the outside. What happens physically in the body and brain during these strange nightly adventures? Dreams may feel strange and unpredictable, but the body gives off quite a few clues that they're happening. Scientists can't see the dream itself, but they can observe when the brain enters a dreaming state. It's like trying to figure out what someone's watching on telly based on their facial expressions. Not exact, but you get a decent idea. Most dreaming happens during a stage of sleep called REM, short for rapid eye movement. It's named after the jerky flickers of the eyes beneath closed lids, which are often one of the clearest signs that someone is in the thick of a dream. Meanwhile, the rest of the body becomes more or less paralyzed. Handy, really. Otherwise, you might act out the dream about fighting a penguin with a spoon. During REM sleep, breathing becomes irregular, heart rate speeds up, and the brain shows electrical activity that's surprisingly similar to when you're awake. But while it looks active, it's not behaving in quite the same way. Parts linked to logic and self-awareness go a bit quiet. Others, like those handling emotion and visual processing, light up. The result is a state that's alert and vivid, but not particularly rational. It's worth noting that dreams aren't limited to REM. They can also happen in non-REM stages, though they tend to be shorter, less vivid, and more fragmented. Scientists used to think REM meant dreaming, and non-REM didn't. That turned out to be wrong, again proving that the brain isn't especially interested in making things easy to study. What's interesting is how regular the sleep cycle is. A typical night involves several cycles, each lasting around 90 minutes. REM tends to dominate the later part of the night, with longer and more complex dreams as morning approaches. So, if you've ever woken up mid-dream and remembered it in vivid detail, it's probably because you were in REM during that last cycle. Outside the lab, you won't notice most of this. You go to sleep, you wake up, and occasionally recall something about talking animals or forgotten deadlines. But behind the scenes, there's a whole routine unfolding. Brain waves slow down and speed up. Chemicals shift, muscles are turned off, and thoughts are turned on. The body may look still, but the brain is anything but. And yet, despite all this activity, you're completely unaware of it in the moment. You're in the middle of the dream, reacting, feeling, believing it, without any idea that it's all being generated from inside your own skull, which does make it slightly less glamorous than people tend to imagine. This leads us to consider the scale of what's really going on. The sheer number of cells, signals, and systems that quietly build the dream experience from the inside out. From the outside, sleep looks peaceful. But inside your skull, things are anything but quiet. The brain contains around 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others through synapses. Even during sleep, these neurons are still firing, still communicating, still busy. In fact, some parts of the brain become even more active when you're dreaming than when you're awake. To get a sense of scale, imagine each neuron as a person in a city. Now give each person a phone and have them ring 10,000 of their closest friends every few seconds. That's roughly what your brain is doing while you lie still under the duvet. It's not chaos, it's a very busy system with layers of pattern and structure that we're only beginning to understand. And yet, all of this happens at a microscopic level. Each electrical signal or action potential lasts only a few milliseconds and travels a few millimeters. But zoom out, and the result is a vivid world constructed in your mind. A dream. In other words, something enormous feeling is being built out of extremely small events, repeated constantly across billions of cells. Dreams are shaped by these patterns, bursts of activity in visual areas, loops involving memory circuits, and spontaneous firing in regions that handle emotion. The scale of this activity is immense, but it's not random. The brain isn't just switching on and hoping for the best. It's more like a complex weather system, with local storms, global rhythms, and the occasional flying dog. What's also surprising is how little external input is involved. When dreaming, your brain is mostly closed off from the outside world. No light, no sound, no touch, just internal noise. And yet it manages to build images, voices, stories. Like a film studio with no props, actors, or scripts, but still convinced it's making something worth watching. On top of that, the brain isn't working alone. The whole body follows cycles. Hormones, temperature, breathing, heart rate, all playing their part in the background. These systems sync with brain rhythms, rising and falling through sleep phases. You don't feel it, but the coordination is precise and quietly astonishing if you're into that sort of thing. From a wider perspective, this tells us something important. Complex experiences don't need huge external triggers. The most elaborate dream can come from subtle patterns, inside a space smaller than a loaf of bread. And yet, those patterns are part of something much bigger, linked to evolution, biology, and natural laws that span the universe. This leads us to begin unpacking the mechanism itself. The step-by-step process the brain follows as dreaming begins. Now that we've seen how vast and active the brain is during sleep, the next question is obvious. What actually kicks off a dream? The process begins with the sleep cycle, a regular pattern your body and brain follow during the night. It repeats roughly every 90 minutes and includes both non-REM and REM stages. Each has its own role, but REM is where dreams most often take shape. As you drift into sleep, your brain slows down. You move through the early non-REM stages, where brain waves become longer and more regular. Muscles relax, breathing deepens. But this isn't dreaming yet. It's more like system maintenance. Then, about 60 to 90 minutes in, the brain enters REM sleep. Here, things shift. Neurons start firing rapidly again. The scene is set. A small region in the brainstem called the pons plays a key role here. The pons sends signals upwards to other areas of the brain, especially those involved in visual processing, memory, and emotion. At the same time, it sends signals downwards to shut off motor neurons, effectively paralyzing your body. This is useful. Otherwise, if you dream of sprinting, you might wake up halfway through a coffee table. During REM, the thalamus becomes active too. This part of the brain acts like a relay station, normally passing on sensory input from the world outside. But during dreaming, it mainly connects with internal parts of the brain instead. That means most dream material isn't based on real-time sights or sounds, but on what's already stored inside you. The cerebral cortex, especially the occipital lobe at the back of the brain, also lights up. This area handles visual input, and it's why dreams often feel like vivid, moving pictures. Meanwhile, the amygdala, central to emotion, is particularly active. This likely explains why dreams are so emotionally charged, even if the story itself doesn't make much sense. Interestingly, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic, planning, and self-awareness, goes relatively quiet. That's probably why dreams feel convincing in the moment. You're not questioning them. You're not saying, "Hang on, why is my grandmother a traffic light?" You're just going with it, as if your brain's on autopilot with no editor present. All of this suggests that dreaming isn't chaos, it's a process. Specific regions are switched on, others muted. The brain builds a temporary, immersive world using signals that are partly structured and partly spontaneous. The result is a story-like experience, created internally, often based on fragments of memory, emotion, and imagination. This leads us to consider what happens next, as the process unfolds more deeply and more strangely. In the later phases of sleep, once the basic mechanism of dreaming kicks in, brainstem signals, limb movements suppressed, visual areas activated, the process deepens. The brain begins to integrate information from different sources: memory, emotion, imagination, and pattern recognition. These aren't clean labeled files being pulled out from drawers, more like scraps from various rooms being stitched into something that vaguely resembles a storyline. Key to this process is the limbic system. It includes structures like the amygdala and hippocampus, responsible for emotion and memory. During REM sleep, the amygdala becomes highly active, giving dreams their emotional intensity. Whether it's fear, joy, confusion, or longing, your brain adds a layer of feeling that makes even the strangest scenes feel meaningful. At least until you wake up and realize you were crying over a sandwich. The hippocampus, which helps consolidate memories, also plays a role. It doesn't just replay exact moments from your day. Instead, it pulls fragments, images, locations, faces, and blends them with unrelated material. This is why you might end up in your childhood home arguing with your current boss while wearing pajamas from 2009. It's not that your brain is being silly, it's trying to connect things that might be relevant to your current emotional state. Meanwhile, the default mode network, a group of interconnected brain regions active during rest and introspection, seems to play a subtle part. This network is involved in daydreaming, remembering the past, and imagining the future. It may contribute to the self-referential nature of dreams, where you're often the main character, even if you're also somehow watching yourself from the outside. Importantly, there's no single dream center in the brain. Dreaming is a networked activity involving communication between various regions. And these connections aren't static. They evolve during the night. Early dreams may be short, basic, and fragmented. But as REM cycles repeat, the connections grow stronger, the narratives more complex, and the emotional weight more pronounced. Dreams don't necessarily make logical sense, but they do follow certain patterns, story arcs, characters, settings. Sometimes they jump around, but often they have an internal rhythm. This suggests the brain is doing more than just firing randomly. It's attempting to simulate something coherent, even if the coherence is on its own strange terms. All of this activity is built from energy. Neurons consume oxygen and glucose, transmit electrical impulses, and exchange chemicals across synapses. The brain doesn't rest during dreams. It reallocates its focus, from sensory input to internal reconstruction, from reacting to the world outside to exploring what's already inside. This leads us to consider how this deeply human process might not be limited to humans, and whether similar mechanisms appear across species and scales. So far, we've looked at how dreams form in the human brain. Specific circuits, chemical signals, and electrical patterns working together. But humans aren't the only ones who sleep. And if dreaming is tied to sleep, that opens the door to a wider question. Are we the only species that dreams, or is this a much older, more widespread process? Research suggests that many animals do, in fact, show signs of REM sleep. Mammals like dogs, cats, rats, and even whales enter REM phases with similar eye movements and brain activity patterns. Birds, too, pigeons, crows, and zebra finches, experience REM-like states, often in short bursts. These observations make it likely that they're not just asleep, but actively experiencing something like dreams. One particularly striking example comes from octopuses. These clever invertebrates display color-shifting behaviors during sleep, rapid changes in skin tone and body texture, suggesting internal brain activity. Some scientists believe they may be replaying memories or reacting to dreamlike internal states. Whether they're dreaming about hunting, hiding, or whatever counts as a social embarrassment in octopus culture, we don't yet know. What's clear is that REM sleep, and possibly dreaming, appears to have evolved multiple times. It shows up in distant evolutionary lineages, from reptiles to birds to mammals, which implies that it may offer some kind of survival advantage. That advantage may be memory processing, emotional regulation, or simply energy-efficient simulation of complex scenarios. The fact that these patterns are found across such a wide range of species suggests that dreaming, or something like it, is not uniquely human. It's part of a broader biological system. Brains, when left without external input, still generate internal activity, and that activity often takes the form of sensory simulation, essentially rehearsing the world without needing to interact with it. This points to a remarkable consistency in how biology handles complexity. Whether it's a rat, a raven, or a human, the brain cycles through sleep stages, enters REM, and produces internal experiences. That's not just a coincidence. It's nature repeating a strategy that works. Simulate, consolidate, adapt, repeat. Of course, we can't ask a dog what it dreamt about. And it's probably not worrying about GCSE results or forgetting someone's birthday. But the signs are strong. Animals with complex nervous systems tend to experience some form of internal simulation during sleep, which suggests the mechanism isn't just shared, it's fundamental. This leads us to consider another dimension of dreaming, how it unfolds across time. Because dreams don't just happen in space, they stretch and shift through time as well. Dreams don't just take place in space. They move through time. But unlike waking life, dream time doesn't follow the same rules. A single dream can feel as though it stretches for hours, even if it only lasts a few minutes, or it might skip forward in leaps, jumping from moment to moment like a badly edited film. Time inside a dream is less about accuracy and more about experience. This isn't just an illusion. The timing of dreams follows a real, measurable pattern through the night. Sleep is divided into cycles, each lasting around 90 minutes, with REM stages gradually increasing in length as the night progresses. The first REM stage might only last 10 minutes, while later ones can stretch to nearly an hour. That's why dreams often feel longer and more detailed toward the early morning. The changing length of these REM stages affects not just the quantity of dreams, but their complexity. Early in the night, dreams are usually short and fragmented, brief bursts of imagery or emotion. Later, as REM periods grow, the brain has more time to build coherent narratives. That's when dreams start to resemble stories, with beginnings, middles, and occasionally even proper endings, though still not a single satisfying plot twist. This temporal structure also influences how well we remember dreams. You're more likely to recall a dream if you wake up during or just after a REM phase. Waking from deeper non-REM stages tends to erase memory of dreams altogether. That's why you might have dreamt all night, but wake up with only the vaguest sense that something happened, possibly involving a bad haircut and a helicopter. Interestingly, some parts of the brain involved in measuring real time are less active during REM sleep. This may help explain why dream time feels elastic. Without the brain's usual timekeeping systems fully online, the flow of events becomes more subjective. A moment can stretch into a lifetime, or a lifetime can collapse into a few seconds. What's happening here is a shift in how the brain processes sequences. Awake, we rely on consistent sensory input to anchor time. Sunlight, speech, heartbeat, clocks. But during sleep, those inputs vanish. The brain still builds timelines, but they're internal, often based on emotion or narrative momentum, rather than fixed intervals. Which is why you can fall off a cliff for 20 minutes in a dream and never hit the ground. In a way, this bending of time reflects something broader about consciousness. It's not always tied to the world outside. Sometimes it loops inward, creating its own structure. The dream is both a product and a container of that inner time. A personal rhythm, detached from clocks, calendars, and external logic. This leads us to consider a sobering truth. That for all the meaning we might attach to dreams, the process itself doesn't care. It continues, indifferent to our interpretations or feelings about it. For all their intensity, dreams do not occur because your brain wants to tell you something. It isn't planning a message, crafting a moral, or trying to resolve your personal drama with metaphorical penguins. The process is largely automatic, a result of how the sleeping brain functions, not because it cares what you'll think in the morning. The mechanisms that create dreams operate without preference. The pons fires its signals, the thalamus routes information, memory fragments surface, emotional centers become more active. The result is something that feels vivid, meaningful, even profound. But that's our interpretation, layered over a process that continues whether or not we pay attention to it. In fact, most dreams are forgotten completely. The brain doesn't seem particularly interested in preserving them. It doesn't store them like proper memories unless specific conditions are met. Usually a brief waking period at the right moment. So it's entirely possible you've had hundreds of dramatic, intricate dreams that vanished without a trace, like a badly written soap opera no one bothered to record. This is where the cosmic perspective begins to show itself. The same laws of physics and biology that create stars, rivers, and ecosystems also govern the electrical rhythms of a sleeping brain. And those rhythms produce dreams, but they do so without intention. There is no grand plan, no higher purpose, just neurons behaving as neurons do. That might sound bleak until you realize it's also rather freeing. The brain's indifference means we're not being judged by our subconscious. There's no secret test we're failing, just because we dreamt about turning up to school wearing flippers. It's just the byproduct of a biological system running through its nightly routines. And yet, within that indifference, we find meaning. We try to decode dreams, interpret their symbols, link them to waking life. That urge to make sense of chaos is deeply human, even when the chaos isn't personal at all. It's like trying to find meaning in cloud shapes. The process that forms them doesn't care what we see, but we look anyway. The same goes for the wider universe. It doesn't need our understanding to function. Stars don't twinkle for our benefit. Black holes aren't dramatic for dramatic's sake. But we observe, we question, we try to explain. That curiosity, the will to notice and understand, is what brings significance, even if the process itself doesn't provide it. This leads us to consider how humans have dealt with this mystery over time, starting with the earliest attempts to explain the dreams that arrived each night, whether welcome or not. Long before brain scans and sleep labs, people still dreamt, and naturally, they tried to make sense of it. Ancient civilizations viewed dreams not as random brain activity, but as messages, sometimes from gods, sometimes from ancestors, and sometimes from something even stranger. If you dreamt of a river turning red or a lion speaking fluent Aramaic, you'd probably start wondering what it meant for the harvest. In Mesopotamia, dreams were considered serious business. Clay tablets from over 4,000 years ago include entire dream manuals, lists of common dreams alongside what they were believed to predict. Dream of eating figs? Good fortune. Dream of teeth falling out? Bad omen. The interpretation system was fairly confident, although how reliable it was is anyone's guess, especially if you were the fig merchant. Egyptians took it further. They saw dreams as a way for the gods to speak directly to individuals. Special priests, called masters of secrets, no less, were trained to interpret them. Temples offered dream incubation, where people would sleep in sacred spaces hoping to receive divine advice. Today, we call that a camping trip with spiritual pressure. The Greeks and Romans also treated dreams with respect. Philosophers like Artemidorus wrote detailed dream interpretation texts. Meanwhile, others, like Hippocrates, began to suggest that dreams might come from the body rather than the heavens. A stomach upset, for example, could influence your visions, which, frankly, still explains quite a few cheese-induced nightmares today. Across the globe, similar patterns emerged. In China, dreams were linked to spiritual journeys or contact with the dead. In parts of Africa and the Americas, they were sometimes seen as alternate realities, other lives playing out during the night. These ideas varied, but they shared something in common: the belief that dreams were meaningful, powerful, and not just private nonsense. There was also an effort to collect and compare dreams. Patterns were noticed. Certain images, like flying, falling, or teeth, seemed to occur again and again. Even thousands of years ago, people were recording dream accounts, looking for meaning in repetition. The scientific method hadn't been invented yet, but the curiosity was definitely there. What's striking is how human all this was. Dreams have always felt significant, even when their logic collapses on closer inspection. That sense of mystery has endured through cultures and centuries, even as the explanations have changed. It says something about our nature. We'd rather believe there's meaning in a strange dream than accept it might just be neural leftovers. This leads us to consider when things started to shift, from symbolic interpretation to structured observation. The point where curiosity moved closer to method and science began to take over from myth. As dream interpretation shifted from temples to study halls, a new kind of curiosity emerged. One less concerned with divine messages and more interested in the machinery of the mind. This marked the beginning of the scientific approach to dreams, not trying to decode their meaning from signs and symbols, but observing how they behaved as part of human psychology. One of the earliest figures in this transition was Sigmund Freud. In 1899, he published The Interpretation of Dreams, proposing that dreams were expressions of unconscious desires, particularly the ones you wouldn't admit in polite company. According to Freud, dreams were disguised wish fulfillments shaped by repression and internal conflict. Subtle? Not especially. Popular? Extremely. Freud's ideas made dreaming a psychological subject rather than a spiritual one. They suggested that the content of a dream could be analyzed to reveal something hidden underneath. While some of his conclusions were, let's say, imaginative, his method started a conversation that still shapes sleep science today, that dreams could be studied systematically, with patterns, hypotheses, and evidence. Carl Jung, originally a student of Freud, took a different route. He believed dreams weren't just about personal desires, but drew from a shared, collective unconscious, a kind of cultural memory passed down across humanity. To him, symbols in dreams were more than nonsense. They were echoes of ancient instincts. If Freud saw the dream as a confession, Jung saw it as a myth retelling itself. It's important to note that while Freud and Jung made dreaming a topic of serious study, their work was still largely theoretical. They didn't have machines to measure sleep stages or track brain activity. What they had were observations, patient accounts, and rather a lot of armchairs. The science was philosophical, fascinating, but not exactly testable in a lab. Still, these early insights opened the door to deeper questions. Why did dreams seem to follow emotional patterns? Why did certain themes recur across people and cultures? Was there a function, or were they simply the mind's late-night ramblings? These questions nudged researchers towards more empirical approaches, moving from armchairs to equipment that could actually measure something. One key shift was recognizing that dreams were connected to sleep stages. Before the discovery of REM sleep in the 1950s, people didn't know that different phases of sleep even existed. But, even before that, some researchers noticed that people were more likely to recall dreams when woken at certain times, hinting that something physical might be influencing the mental. These first steps were crucial. They didn't solve the mystery, but they reframed it. Instead of asking what dreams meant, scientists began asking what dreams did. And with that question, they moved closer to observable, measurable reality. This leads us to consider the tools and techniques that would make this kind of observation possible, and what they began to reveal. To study dreams scientifically, researchers needed a way to peer into the sleeping brain without, understandably, waking the subject up every few minutes to ask what they were dreaming about. This became possible with new tools, devices that could track brain activity, eye movement, and body function during sleep. Finally, the mystery could be approached with wires and data rather than cigars and speculation. The first breakthrough came with the invention of the electroencephalogram, or EEG, in the 1920s. This device records electrical activity in the brain using electrodes placed on the scalp. It showed that the brain isn't quiet during sleep. It moves through distinct stages marked by different wave patterns. In the 1950s, researchers Asarinsky and Kleitman used EEGs and discovered REM sleep, linking it closely to dreaming. REM, or rapid eye movement, turned out to be a goldmine. It's easy to spot on an EEG and usually comes with muscle paralysis, irregular breathing, and darting eye movements. Researchers found that if they woke people up during REM, around 80% reported vivid dreams. Wake them during other stages, and the number dropped. This provided something science loves: a consistent, testable pattern. To collect more detailed data, researchers developed polysomnography, a technique that monitors multiple body signals at once. It includes EEG for brainwaves, EMG for muscle tone, EOG for eye movements, and sensors for breathing and heart rate. It's not the most glamorous setup. You're wired up like a B-movie robot. But it gives a rich picture of what the body's doing as dreams unfold. Over time, these tools became more refined. Brain imaging techniques like PET scans and fMRI allowed researchers to watch which areas of the brain became active during different sleep stages. During REM, for instance, visual and emotional centers light up, while logical reasoning areas stay quiet. This matched what people reported about their dreams: vivid, emotional, and a bit all over the place. One particularly clever method involved waking people at specific points in the sleep cycle and asking them to describe their dreams immediately. Researchers could then compare the reported content with the physiological data. If your brain's visual cortex was active and you dreamt about fireworks, well, the connection seemed more than coincidence. Though, if you dreamt about eating a sofa, interpretation got slightly trickier. Some researchers also experimented with influencing dreams using external stimuli, like playing sounds, flashing lights, or even spraying scents during REM sleep. These could sometimes be incorporated into the dream, like hearing a siren in the real world and dreaming you're in a burning building. It was a bit hit and miss, but it showed that the sleeping brain isn't completely cut off from its surroundings. These tools changed dream research from guesswork to gradual understanding. With measurements and repeatable experiments, the mystery of dreaming could be explored through observation, not just interpretation. But as always in science, progress brought correction, and a growing awareness of just how many wrong turns we'd already taken. This leads us to consider how even the best tools can reinforce bad assumptions, and how scientific thinking requires constant revision. Even with better tools and more data, early dream research still made some classic scientific missteps. Like most areas of study, our understanding of dreaming evolved not just through new discoveries, but by realizing we'd misunderstood or oversimplified things, which is very on brand for science and for humans in general. One of the biggest misconceptions was the idea that dreaming only happens during REM sleep. For years, this was accepted as fact, largely because dream reports were most common when people were woken during REM. But later studies showed that people could dream during non-REM stages too. These dreams tended to be less vivid, but they were still real experiences. So the earlier REM equals dreaming rule turned out to be not entirely wrong, but certainly incomplete. Another idea that didn't hold up was that every dream had a deep symbolic meaning. Freud's dream theory dominated psychology for decades, leading to countless attempts to decode symbols. While some people still enjoy this approach, modern neuroscience doesn't support the idea that the brain deliberately uses dream imagery to hide unconscious desires, especially not ones involving staircases and cigars. Sometimes a dream is just a random collection of emotional fragments, not a psychological escape room. There were also attempts to link external stimuli directly to specific dream content in a neat, predictable way. Play the sound of waves, and the person should dream of the beach. Spray a scent of lavender, and voila! Peaceful forest dream. The reality? It was all far less predictable. Sometimes stimuli were incorporated, sometimes ignored, sometimes warped beyond recognition. The brain does respond to the outside world during sleep, It just doesn't follow a script. Some early studies also treated dream reports as hard evidence, assuming that what people said they dreamt matched exactly what happened in their brain. But memory is unreliable, especially when groggy. People forget, mix up, or even unintentionally invent details. Researchers had to learn that dream data was, by nature, fuzzy. Trying to measure it precisely is a bit like trying to weigh fog. Of course, it's easy to look back and laugh at the outdated theories, but at the time, they were genuine efforts to explain something mysterious using the tools available. Science doesn't march forward in a straight line. It circles, stumbles, and occasionally walks straight into a wall before correcting course. Which is oddly comforting if you've ever tried assembling IKEA furniture without the manual. These corrections didn't mean we were getting worse at understanding dreams, they meant we were getting better. Real science admits when it's wrong, and each correction sharpened the focus, bringing us closer to how dreaming really works in the brain. This leads us to consider how researchers moved from theory and observation to controlled testing, experimenting with dreams themselves, and asking new questions with more precision. As tools improved and theories matured, dream researchers turned to experiments, controlled, repeatable tests that could reveal how dreams work, not just what they feel like. Studying something as personal and unpredictable as dreaming required a bit of creativity. After all, you can't force someone to dream about their aunt's garden shed and expect consistent results. But you can measure what changes under different conditions. One of the earliest and most revealing methods involved dream interruption. Volunteers were monitored while they slept and woken at specific points, usually during REM, to immediately describe what they were experiencing. These reports were then analyzed for patterns: emotional tone, setting, movement, people. Waking someone during non-REM sleep often led to vaguer or more thought-like experiences. The difference suggested that dreaming itself varies depending on brain state. Another line of experiments explored sleep deprivation. If people were denied REM sleep, by being woken every time it began, the brain didn't just shrug and move on. Instead, it responded with REM rebound. Longer and more intense REM periods once allowed to sleep normally again. This suggested that REM, and perhaps dreaming itself, served a biological function the brain was keen to protect. Much like skipping meals tends to make you annoyingly focused on food. Some experiments looked at memory and learning. Subjects were taught a new skill or given a problem to solve, then allowed to sleep. Those who entered REM showed better recall or performance the next day, particularly when the task involved emotion or creativity. It pointed to dreams playing a role in memory consolidation, sorting through experiences, and possibly filing them in some bizarre emotional filing cabinet. Lucid dreaming offered another experimental opportunity. In this state, the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and can sometimes control the dream. Researchers trained participants to perform eye movements during lucid dreams, left, right, which could be picked up on monitoring equipment. This provided a rare bridge between the dream world and the lab, confirming that some dreamers could communicate from within the dream without waking. There were also tests involving stimuli, light flashes, sounds, even gentle touches delivered during REM sleep. Sometimes these were incorporated into dreams, like hearing a beep and dreaming of a microwave. Sometimes they weren't. It became clear the brain doesn't entirely disconnect from the outside world during dreaming, but it's selective, much like when you pretend not to hear someone asking for help with the washing up. Through all this, one theme stood out. Dreams are shaped by both internal processes and external influences, but in complex, often unpredictable ways. No single variable produces a dream on command. What we get instead is a probabilistic process. Patterns, tendencies, and a lot of unpredictability. This leads us to consider the broader effort behind these discoveries. Not the lone genius in a lab coat, but the slow, collaborative work across generations and cultures. While some fields love to spotlight the lone genius, dream research hasn't been that sort of story. Understanding dreams has required cooperation across generations, disciplines, and continents. No one person cracked the mystery. Progress came from countless researchers chipping away at questions, refining tools, and correcting one another's assumptions over time. Science, in this case, has been more relay race than solo sprint. For instance, the discovery of REM sleep in the 1950s was built on years of earlier EEG work. Researchers in different countries, France, the United States, Japan, were all developing techniques to monitor brainwaves. The pieces only came together when shared and tested across groups. Language barriers, funding limitations, and slightly incompatible coffee machines didn't stop the collaboration. Scientific curiosity tends to be fairly persistent. Many dream studies required large teams. Technicians setting up sleep labs, psychologists analyzing dream reports, statisticians spotting trends. Some labs worked through the night, monitoring sleeping participants and waking them at just the right moment. Which, if you think about it, means part of your understanding of dreams comes from a tired postgrad poking people awake at 3 a.m. with a clipboard. It wasn't just time zones and teamwork, though. Cultural perspectives also influence what researchers looked for. In Japan, there was early interest in lucid dreaming and dream control. In Germany, dream content analysis was explored in clinical therapy. Meanwhile, researchers in Brazil examined dreaming in relation to spiritual experiences. These variations helped broaden the scope of what dreams could be. Biological, psychological, symbolic, or sometimes all three. Cross-disciplinary work has also been essential. Neuroscientists measure electrical activity. Psychologists study behavior and recall. Cognitive scientists explore imagination and mental simulation. Even computer scientists are now contributing, using machine learning to decode brain scans into rough visual approximations of dreams. No, we can't play them back on a screen yet. But we're getting closer to something equally unnerving. And still, with all this collective effort, there's disagreement. Competing theories persist about why we dream. Some see it as emotional regulation, others as memory sorting, or even random noise. That disagreement isn't a failure, it's how science works. Different angles sharpen the picture. Eventually, consensus forms, or at least becomes less fuzzy. The scale of collaboration itself mirrors the subject. Dreams are constructed from countless signals, inputs, and feedback loops, and so is the research. It's an effort that spans lifetimes, built not on certainty, but curiosity, and a willingness to keep asking questions long after bedtime. This leads us to consider where this process has brought us now, how modern technology has refined what we know, and what remains just out of reach. After decades of dream experiments and cross-cultural cooperation, we now have a clearer, though still incomplete, picture of what the dreaming brain is doing. Today's technology allows scientists to observe sleep with extraordinary precision. Instead of just tracking eye twitches and brainwaves, researchers can map entire regions of the brain in real time, watching which parts light up as someone enters a dream. Functional MRI, or fMRI, has become one of the key tools. It tracks changes in blood flow, showing which areas of the brain are most active. During REM sleep, fMRI scans consistently show activity in the visual cortex, motor regions, the limbic system, and memory centers. The prefrontal cortex, the bit that keeps your thoughts sensible, remains relatively quiet. This matches dream logic quite neatly. Vivid imagery, strong emotion, and very little common sense. One major step forward has been the attempt to reconstruct dream content using brain imaging and machine learning. In some studies, people are shown images while awake, and their brain activity is recorded. Later, while they sleep and dream, similar activity patterns are detected. AI models then try to guess what they might be dreaming about. So far, these reconstructions are crude, blurry outlines and vague guesses, but it's a start, and possibly the most polite use of artificial intelligence to date. Other modern approaches include targeted memory reactivation. In these experiments, a scent or sound associated with a waking experience is reintroduced during sleep. This can influence dream content and improve memory performance upon waking. It's not exactly directing dreams, but it shows how recent memories can be nudged into the dreaming process, which raises the possibility, someday, of gently steering dreams without fully controlling them, like suggesting a plot twist to a half-asleep screenwriter. EEG technology has also improved dramatically. Portable headbands now allow people to track their own sleep cycles from home with surprising accuracy. This opens up new possibilities for larger datasets and long-term monitoring. Dream research is no longer confined to university labs. It's slowly becoming part of everyday sleep science. Despite all this progress, there are still major gaps. We can map activity, measure cycles, and even make informed guesses about content. But we can't yet fully decode a dream. We don't know how the brain transforms raw emotional and sensory data into a coherent, if baffling, narrative. And we certainly can't explain why you dreamed of arguing with a biscuit in your childhood dentist's office. Not yet. Modern tools give us sharper images and better data. But dreams remain, for now, partially outside our reach. The mystery hasn't disappeared. It's just become more detailed, more structured, less mystical, but still deeply strange. This leads us to the question that quietly underpins all scientific progress. How much do we still not know? And what happens when the mystery deepens rather than clears? Despite all the data, scans, and carefully labeled charts, dreams remain a slippery subject. Neuroscience can tell us when and where things happen in the brain. Psychology can suggest why we might dream about certain things. But none of it quite explains the experience itself. Why some dreams feel meaningful, and others feel like badly edited films involving a talking goat and your Year 8 maths teacher. This points to a deeper problem in dream science: subjectivity. Dreams happen inside a person's mind. They're vivid, emotional, and often confusing. But they're also private. Even if you try to describe your dream in great detail, the scientific tools outside your head can only measure brain activity, not the actual dream. It's a bit like trying to work out what someone's watching on telly by looking at the power usage of their television. The result is a strange scientific divide. On one side, We have objective measurements, waves, blood flow, chemical signals. On the other, personal reports, feelings, symbols, narratives. Scientists rely on both, but bridging them is tricky, especially when what someone dreamed can't be verified by anything except their own slightly baffled account. Some researchers argue that dreams are just byproducts, meaningless leftovers of memory processing or random neural firing. Others think they serve important emotional or cognitive functions, rehearsing threats, solving problems, consolidating identity. But none of these ideas can be fully proven. For now, the science rests on probabilities and educated guesses, which, to be fair, is still more reliable than your mate down the pub who reckons dreaming of teeth falling out means you're pregnant. Another difficulty lies in cultural variation. Different societies have different dream traditions. In some, dreams are messages from ancestors. In others, they're omens or predictions. From a scientific perspective, these interpretations aren't wrong, they're just not testable. They reflect how people make meaning, not how neurons fire. Trying to study dreams while ignoring culture is like studying language without listening to anyone speak. There's also the small matter of memory. People forget most of their dreams. Within 5 minutes of waking, half of a dream may vanish. Within 10, almost everything is gone. This makes collecting accurate data especially difficult. It's like trying to study snowfall with a torch and a bucket. In spring, all of this doesn't mean science has failed. It just means the subject is difficult. Dreams live at the edge of what science can currently explain. The machinery is visible, the meaning is not. It's a bit like watching someone play a piano in another room. You can hear the notes, but you can't see their hands. This leads us to a quiet truth. Not everything meaningful can be measured, and not everything measurable is meaningful, which brings us, gently, to the deeper end of the pool, where dreams meet mystery, and science meets philosophy. So far, we've focused on what happens in the brain when we dream, but many people care less about the neuroscience and more about what dreams mean. Not in a lab coat sense, but in a personal one. Why did I dream about my childhood home? What does it mean if I'm always late for school, despite being 42 and employed at a call center? This is where we enter the realm of philosophy and subjective meaning. Unlike science, which tries to measure things, philosophy tries to think through them. One big idea is that dreams might offer insight into the self. Not just our memories or daily stresses, but how we feel, how we see the world, and what we might be trying to avoid. A kind of nighttime therapy, minus the awkward silences and hourly rate. Some thinkers, like Carl Jung, took this seriously. He believed dreams weren't random at all. They revealed patterns from the unconscious mind. Symbols, characters, and scenes stood for things we didn't quite understand when awake. A snake might not just be a snake. It might represent transformation, fear, or, occasionally, a snake. Interpretation, he said, required careful reflection, not Google search results. But not everyone agrees. Some philosophers argue dreams don't mean anything. They're just the brain recycling thoughts, stitched together without logic. Others suggest meaning exists, but only the dreamer can really say what that meaning is. It's not something to decode with a universal key. More like looking in a mirror that sometimes lies to you, but still tells you something worth hearing. There's also a deeper debate about consciousness. When we dream, we experience sights, sounds, emotions, all without any external input. So where do those experiences come from? If the world inside a dream can feel real, what exactly do we mean by real in the first place? These aren't questions science can easily settle, but they do remind us how strange and flexible our minds can be. Some people see dreams as spiritual or even mystical. That's not a scientific claim, but it's part of how humans have always made sense of experience. From ancient dream temples in Egypt to modern dream journaling apps, people have treated dreams as more than noise. Whether that belief is accurate is one thing, but it's certainly persistent. Ultimately, dreams sit at the crossroads of many things: biology, psychology, memory, culture, and yes, philosophy. They're made by the brain, but they matter to the mind. They don't follow the rules of waking logic, yet they sometimes show us truths we ignore when we're awake, which, frankly, is a bit rude of them. This leads us to a closing thought. If dreams show us the brain trying to make sense of itself, then maybe understanding dreams isn't just about science or symbols. Maybe it's about recognizing that we are, each night, briefly transported into a world entirely our own. We've traveled from brain waves to meaning, from muscle twitches to memory rehearsal. But despite all the research, many aspects of dreaming remain uncertain. Not because scientists aren't trying, but because the brain is, frankly, a bit of a show-off. It's the most complex object we know of, and it insists on carrying out much of its work while unconscious. One major frontier is dream function. We've explored ideas like memory consolidation and emotional processing, but which functions matter most? Or are dreams doing many things at once? It's a bit like asking what your phone is for. It calls people, sure, but it also sends messages, plays music, tracks your steps, and tries to sell you trainers at 2 a.m. There's also the question of individual variation. Some people dream vividly and often. Others rarely remember anything. Are their brains wired differently? Do their sleep stages unfold in alternate ways? Or is it more about attention? What we choose to notice when we wake. We know sleep patterns vary. Perhaps dream patterns do too. Then there are the stranger edges of experience. Lucid dreaming, for instance, where the dreamer knows they're dreaming and may even influence the plot. It sounds like science fiction, but it's real and measurable. Brain scans show hybrid patterns of activity, part REM sleep, part waking awareness, like the brain is trying to multitask badly. Even more speculative are reports of shared dreams, predictive dreams, or dream telepathy. These ideas don't currently hold up under scientific scrutiny, but they're persistent in human culture. The cautious approach is to investigate them calmly and rigorously, without assuming either hidden truths or hidden nonsense. Technology is also changing the game. Brain imaging tools let researchers observe sleep in more detail than ever before. AI is being used to identify patterns across thousands of dream reports. And experimental techniques, like targeted memory reactivation, try to influence what someone dreams by playing specific sounds or smells as they sleep. Early days, but promising. What's striking is how dreams continue to resist full explanation. They're private, yet universal, personal, yet patterned. We can measure the rhythms of sleep, but not the feeling of falling through an endless sky or searching for a door that never quite appears. The inner world, it turns out, is just as vast as the outer one. This leads us to consider a simple point. Science has explained much about dreaming, but not everything, and maybe it never will. Some parts of the night mind may remain just that. Nightbound, shifting, half-lit. But that doesn't mean we stop looking. If anything, it's a reason to keep dreaming, both literally and scientifically. And so we arrive at the central mystery: why do we dream? After all the theories, scans, and sleep labs, the answer still isn't settled. Dreaming appears to serve several possible purposes, some functional, some incidental. It could be memory, mood, creativity, or just something the brain happens to do whilst defragging itself. One leading idea is memory consolidation. During sleep, especially REM, the brain reviews, reorganizes, and strengthens memories. Dreams might reflect that process. Snippets from the day get replayed, often out of order and mashed together, rather like trying to file your taxes whilst watching old episodes of EastEnders on fast forward. There's also emotional processing. Dreams seem to exaggerate social and emotional situations. Fights, chases, misunderstandings with your gran. Brain areas linked to emotion are active in REM sleep, while the logic centers quieten down. Some scientists suggest this helps us rehearse tricky feelings without the real-world fallout. Then, there's creativity. Famous stories exist of dreams inspiring art, inventions, or solutions to tricky problems. The brain, untethered from rules, combines ideas in new ways. Though, to be fair, most of us are dreaming about trying to sit an exam in a car made of toast. Creative? Arguably. Useful? Not especially. Others see dreams as something more basic, a byproduct. The activation synthesis hypothesis says the dreaming brain is just responding to random activity from the brainstem, stitching together a story to make sense of it. Like a newsreader, trying to present the day's headlines while being pelted with tennis balls. More recent thinking blends these ideas. Dreams may emerge from the brain's general job of predicting and modeling the world. During sleep, it keeps practicing that job, generating scenarios, testing reactions, running simulations. It's not that dreams have one purpose, more that they reflect the work of a brain trying to stay ready. It's worth noting that dream content varies across cultures, histories, and individuals. Some people dream in rich narratives, others see static scenes or nothing at all. Interpretation is slippery. While we can study the brain's activity, the personal meaning of a dream, if any, remains private. The science ends where subjectivity begins. In the end, dreaming may be like art or humor or eyebrows. It's evolved with us. It probably does something. But exactly what and how depends on when you ask, who you ask, and which part of the brain they're measuring. The only certainty is this: if dreams are meaningless, they're surprisingly committed to the bit. This leads us to consider the final question. If dreams do something useful, could we learn to use them on purpose? If dreaming has a function, could we steer it? Lucid dreaming is the curious state in which the dreamer becomes aware they're dreaming. Sometimes they can even control what happens next. Fly, teleport, ask a talking dog the meaning of life. It's all on the table, provided your brain's in the right sort of mood. Lucid dreams most often occur during REM sleep, just like regular dreaming. But brain scans show unusual patterns. Part of the prefrontal cortex, normally asleep, lights up. That's the bit involved in self-awareness and decision-making. It's as if the brain briefly wakes up, but stays inside the dream, rather like sleepwalking, but without the risk of falling down the stairs. Some people report spontaneous lucid dreams, often triggered by something odd, like a digital clock melting, or your maths teacher turning into a spoon. Others train for them. Techniques include reality checks, trying to push your finger through your palm, dream journals, and setting intentions before sleep. no candles or chanting required. Lucid dreaming isn't just a party trick. Some researchers think it could have therapeutic value. For people with frequent nightmares, being aware that the dream isn't real can be calming or allow them to change the outcome. It's also being explored for treating PTSD, practicing skills, or even easing anxiety. Although, let's be honest, most people just want to fly. There are limits, of course. Not everyone can learn it. Some manage it a few times in life, others with practice, and some never at all. And even when you're lucid, you're still inside a dreaming brain. Logic is wobbly, memory is patchy, and yes, you might forget you're dreaming halfway through a conversation with a lizard in a suit. There's also debate about how useful, or even restful, lucid dreaming really is. Some sleep scientists worry that trying to control dreams might reduce the emotional benefits of letting the brain process things naturally. After all, if your brain's trying to sort its emotional laundry, interrupting to ride a dragon might not help. That said, the study of lucid dreaming has given us rare insight into consciousness. In experiments, lucid dreamers have been trained to send signals to the outside world using eye movements. They're asleep but can communicate with researchers, which, depending on your view of dreams, is either fascinating or mildly disturbing. This leads us to consider one last frontier. If dreams can be observed and even steered, could we one day record them? If dreams can be studied, interrupted, and even shaped, the next logical question is, could we one day record them? Not metaphorically, literally, replay a dream on a screen like a home movie. It sounds like science fiction. And, to be fair, it still mostly is. But scientists have taken the first small steps in that direction. The most promising experiments come from neuroimaging. In one study, volunteers were shown a set of images while their brains were scanned using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. Later, as they slept, similar brain patterns reappeared during REM sleep. And the researchers could guess, roughly, what sort of image the person was dreaming about. Not exactly Spielberg, but it's a start. Other teams have trained algorithms to match brain activity with visual data. Subjects watch thousands of short video clips while the machine learns to link brain patterns to moving images. Then, when the person is shown a new clip, the software can reconstruct a blurry approximation of what they saw, using only brain data. It's like trying to paint someone's dream from smudged fingerprints. This works best for simple visuals, shapes, movements, general categories like person or city street. No one's extracting detailed plot twists or recording your dream about riding a unicycle through a volcano staffed by squirrels. But the principle is there. In theory, a dream could be reverse engineered from the brain's electrical signals, assuming you've got the equipment, the patience, and no strong desire for privacy. Ethically, it raises awkward questions. If dreams become data, who owns them? Could a future employer ask to scan your dreams just to get a feel for your subconscious attitude? Could someone hack a dream recording? Not the most restful thought. Although perhaps slightly better than being stuck in a recurring GCSE maths nightmare. It's worth noting that dreams aren't like films with clear structure. They're often disjointed, emotional, and symbolic. Even if you could project them onto a screen, it might still be a jumble of shifting faces and floating staircases. Like an art house film made by a director with a head injury. So yes, recording dreams might soon be possible, but understanding them remains another challenge entirely. Still, the idea that internal experience could one day be visualized is changing how scientists think about consciousness. We've moved from guessing based on behavior to measuring brain states, to possibly decoding them. It's early days, but the trend is clear. This leads us to one final consideration. If dreams can be studied and even accessed from the outside, what does that say about the boundary between brain and self? Having explored whether dreams might one day be recorded, we now return to a deeper question. What do dreams reveal about the mind itself? Not just the brain, but the conscious self, the inner narrator, the bit that says, me. As it turns out, dreaming is one of the few times that consciousness operates without the outside world interfering. When you're awake, your brain is constantly processing input. Sounds, sights, smells, the odd pigeon flying too close. It filters, it edits, and it tries to keep things vaguely coherent. In dreams, all that external noise goes quiet. The brain keeps running, but with the doors shut, which makes dreams a rare opportunity to study pure internal thought, unprompted by what's going on around us. This gives scientists a strange advantage. If they want to know what consciousness does when left alone, dreams offer a kind of natural experiment. You get perception without input, memory without context, emotion without cause. It's not always pretty, but it's useful, like rummaging through someone's sock drawer to understand their personality. One clear pattern is that the brain never really switches off. Even in deep sleep, it remains active, just differently active. Certain regions slow down, especially those responsible for logic and impulse control, whilst others light up. The result, wild ideas, no filter, and occasionally dreaming you've married your Year 8 chemistry teacher. The dream state isn't random, it's creative, emotional, and stubbornly self-referential. Some researchers suggest that dreaming is a form of mental housekeeping. We replay experiences, test responses, and reorganize memories. It's a bit like reshelving a library, except the books occasionally yell at you in Latin. And crucially, it's all generated from within. That tells us something important about the nature of the mind. It builds models of reality, even when there's no reality present. Dreams also seem to support the idea that consciousness is layered. There's the part that observes, the part that feels, the part that invents, and in lucid dreams, the part that suddenly goes, hang on, I'm dreaming. That moment, when one layer becomes aware of another, is oddly revealing. It suggests that even your sense of being you can split into pieces. All this paints a picture of the brain not as a passive organ, but as a self-generating machine. It doesn't just react to the world, it predicts, invents, and hallucinates regularly. The fact that this doesn't concern us more is either a testament to our resilience or a sign we're all in quiet denial. As we leave dreams behind, one question remains. If the brain can conjure up entire realities during sleep, what else is it capable of? And how much of what we call reality is simply the most consistent dream? So far, we've looked at sleep, dreams, and what the brain gets up to when left to its own devices, all of which brings us to one final, rather sticky subject: consciousness itself. What is it? Where does it come from? And why does it feel like something to be you, but not, say, a toaster? The short answer is, nobody really knows. Consciousness remains one of the most puzzling scientific mysteries. It's not that we don't understand the brain. We've made great strides. We know how neurons fire, how memories form, how thoughts emerge. But explaining how those biological processes give rise to subjective experience is another matter entirely. This problem even has a name: the hard problem of consciousness. Coined by philosopher David Chalmers, it refers to the gap between brain activity and awareness. You can map every electrical impulse in someone's head and still have no idea why that produces the feeling of seeing red or remembering your nan's perfume. Some scientists argue that consciousness is an emergent property. Like wetness in water, it's not in any single molecule, but it appears when enough of them interact. Others think we're looking at it wrong entirely, and that consciousness isn't produced by the brain so much as filtered through it. A bit like trying to understand Netflix by taking apart your Wi-Fi router. Then there are those who think we need new physics, that consciousness might arise from quantum processes inside neurons, or from information behaving in a certain way. These ideas are more speculative, and often met with the scientific equivalent of a raised eyebrow and a long sigh. There's also a big practical problem. You can't measure consciousness directly. You can ask people what they're experiencing, but that relies on trust and language. You can scan their brains, but that just shows activity, not awareness. In science, this is a bit like trying to study wind using only a photograph of a tree. And yet, for all this uncertainty, one thing is clear: consciousness exists. At least yours does, presumably. It's real, it's persistent, and it somehow turns electrical impulses into the experience of being alive. That's not trivial. It might be the most significant fact in the universe, and we still don't know how it works. This leads us to consider a final question. If consciousness is such a slippery, subjective thing, could other forms exist that we simply don't recognize? Might there be minds unlike ours, non-human, non-biological, or even planetary, that we overlook just because they don't fit our idea of thought? If human consciousness is still a mystery to us, it's fair to ask whether there might be other kinds of minds we've yet to notice. Not just alien civilizations, but forms of awareness that aren't human at all, or even alive in the way we normally think of it. Perhaps we've spent centuries looking for neighbors, whilst ignoring the minds already here. Octopuses, for example, are rather unnerving. Their nervous systems are so unlike ours, it's hard to say where their minds begin or end. 2/3 of their neurons aren't even in the brain, they're in their arms. Each limb can act semi-independently, solving problems or opening jars without needing direct instruction. It's like having 8 slightly annoyed interns with no line manager. Then there are trees. Obviously, they don't talk or do Sudoku. But trees communicate, share nutrients through underground fungal networks, and respond to threats. Some researchers think they might even have a primitive form of memory. It's not consciousness as we know it, but it's also not nothing. The line between life and awareness may be thinner than we'd like to admit. What about artificial intelligence? Not the kind that tells you what time the bus is due, but future systems that might develop self-awareness. At present, machines can simulate intelligence, but they don't feel anything. Still, if consciousness really does emerge from complexity, then it's possible that a sufficiently advanced system could cross that threshold. We wouldn't necessarily notice until it started demanding Wi-Fi rights. Even entire ecosystems might exhibit a kind of mind. The Gaia hypothesis suggests that Earth behaves like a self-regulating organism, maintaining conditions suitable for life. It's a bit controversial, and most scientists stop short of calling it conscious. But it does raise the question: How big can a mind be? Perhaps individual brains are just one model among many. There's also the idea that consciousness could be more widespread in nature than we realize, known as panpsychism. It suggests that all matter has some form of experience, however minimal. A single atom wouldn't be self-aware, but in large, structured systems, those tiny flickers might combine into something more significant. Admittedly, it's a theory that annoys both physicists and philosophers equally, which is quite the achievement. The truth is, we don't yet know how to define or detect consciousness beyond ourselves. We rely heavily on similarity. If something looks or behaves like us, we assume it has a mind. If it doesn't, we tend to dismiss it. That's convenient, but not particularly scientific. Especially when dealing with the universe, which has never shown much interest in fitting our expectations. This leads us to a final thought. If minds can exist in ways we don't yet understand, what does that mean for our place in the cosmos? Are we one of many forms of awareness, or simply one of the few able to ask the question? So far, we've explored matter, energy, life, and minds. But there's one final, slightly unnerving step. Us. Or more specifically, what we represent. We're not just physical systems running complex chemistry. We are part of the universe. And, somehow, we're watching it, thinking about it, even asking where it came from, which is frankly a bit odd. Because, on the surface, the universe doesn't seem particularly bothered about meaning. It expands, it cools, it churns out galaxies. Most of it is empty space, dark matter, and radiation. Not exactly ingredients for a thoughtful afternoon. Yet, on at least one planet, atoms have arranged themselves into beings who wonder why they exist. And those beings build telescopes and spreadsheets. This self-awareness might be more than a biological quirk. It may be an emergent feature of complexity. In other words, once matter gets complicated enough, like brains, language, or science, it starts reflecting on itself. That doesn't mean the universe has a purpose, but it does mean some parts of it have started asking questions about the rest. Physicists sometimes describe this as the universe becoming self-observing, which sounds grand until you realize it's mostly humans with patchy broadband trying to model particle interactions. Still, it is strange that reality contains within it things capable of understanding bits of reality. A hydrogen atom doesn't do much pondering, but assemble enough of them and you get Shakespeare. Or worse, marketing departments. Some theories, like quantum mechanics, even seem to involve observation in the workings of the universe itself. In certain interpretations, particles don't settle into a definite state until they're measured. That doesn't mean minds create reality, just that observation appears to play a role. The precise nature of that role remains debatable, and physicists remain politely frustrated about it. And then there's the anthropic principle. It points out that we live in a universe compatible with our existence, because, obviously, we're here to notice it. Some versions go further, suggesting that consciousness is not just allowed by the universe, but necessary to define it. That's when things get very philosophical, very quickly, and also quite divisive at scientific conferences. So where does that leave us? Possibly nowhere special. We might just be a temporary byproduct of entropy and chance. Or we might represent something the universe rarely manages, a patch of matter that becomes aware, looks around, and starts trying to explain what's going on. Either way, our existence makes the universe slightly more interesting. if only to itself. This leads us to consider a final possibility. If the universe includes things like us, is it trying to understand itself, or are we just another brief experiment in what matter can do when left unsupervised? We end with a question that's puzzled thinkers for millennia and continues to annoy physicists today. Why is there something rather than nothing? It sounds simple enough until you actually try to answer it, at which point the conversation usually takes a long pause and someone starts looking for coffee. Nothing, it turns out, is hard to define. Philosophical nothing means a complete absence of being, no space, no time, no laws of physics. But physics rarely deals in such absolutes. In quantum theory, even the vacuum isn't truly empty. It fizzes with energy, thanks to the uncertainty principle. So what we call nothing is already suspiciously full of stuff. Still, you might ask, why do any laws exist at all? Why are there quantum fields, or space, or time? Why should equations describing particles and forces be true in the first place? One suggestion is that physical laws are simply brute facts. Like, the universe got handed a rulebook and didn't ask questions. But that feels unsatisfying. A bit like explaining a cake by pointing to the recipe and then shrugging. Some physicists have tried a different tactic, working from zero. The idea is that the universe might balance out to nothing overall. Positive energy in matter is cancelled by negative energy in gravity. So the total energy of the universe might be zero, meaning it didn't technically cost anything to make, sort of like assembling IKEA furniture from air. Allegedly. Others invoke the multiverse. Perhaps every possible version of physics exists somewhere, and we just happen to be in a version that allows matter, stars, and people who get into arguments online. It's a bit like asking why your postcode exists. Well, in a city full of postcodes, some are bound to be yours. Whether this is helpful or just dodging the question depends on your mood. Then there's the idea that maybe nothing is unstable. If you had a truly empty void, quantum mechanics might cause it to spontaneously sprout a universe. Not because it wanted to, but because that's what the maths allows. Of course, this doesn't explain why the maths exists. It's turtles all the way down, except the turtles are made of equations. Some thinkers argue the question itself might be flawed. Perhaps, why, is the wrong kind of question to ask of reality. After all, we're evolved to look for causes, not to explain existence from first principles. Trying to reason our way to why anything exists may be like a cat trying to write algebra. It's earnest, but inevitably confused. And so, we end not with a solution, but with a kind of quiet awe. The universe exists. That's weird enough. Whether it had to or just happened to may never be answered. But here we are, asking the question, surrounded by galaxies, atoms, and the occasional biscuit. Having wandered through quantum fields, black holes, and the mystery of existence itself, it's time to acknowledge a slightly awkward truth. There may be questions we simply can't answer. Not because we aren't clever enough, but because the answers might not be knowable at all. The universe doesn't promise explanations. It just is. Start with the obvious constraint, the speed of light. No information can travel faster than this limit. That means vast parts of the universe are forever out of reach. Even if we waited patiently for billions of years with a telescope and some snacks, we still wouldn't see beyond the cosmic horizon. Not because we're lazy, just limited by physics. Then there's quantum uncertainty. At the smallest scales, nature doesn't give precise answers, it gives probabilities. You can ask where a particle is, but you won't get a single answer. Just a fuzzy likelihood cloud. It's not that we're missing something, it's that the universe itself plays by rules that are fundamentally unpredictable. Even more frustrating are the things we might know if we had infinite data. What came before the Big Bang? Is the multiverse real? Are there dimensions curled up so small we'll never detect them? These aren't just difficult questions, they may be permanently outside the reach of experiment, like trying to prove there are no coins down the back of a sofa in a house you're not allowed into. Mathematics offers some additional humility. The work of Kurt Gödel in the 1930s showed that even within a consistent logical system, there will always be truths that can't be proven using the system itself. In other words, any attempt to fully explain everything using maths is guaranteed to bump into something unprovable. So much for solving the universe like a crossword. Philosophy, meanwhile, reminds us that knowledge depends on interpretation. Is the universe real in an objective sense, or is reality tied to observation and experience? These aren't just abstract questions, they shape how we understand things like quantum mechanics and the nature of time. Unfortunately, philosophers rarely agree on anything except that the tea's gone cold again. There's also the possibility that our brains, brilliant as they are at making toast and building particle accelerators, might be inherently limited. We evolved to survive on the savannah, not decode the laws of creation. There may be concepts out there that are simply beyond us, like explaining astrophysics to a cat. No offense to cats, of course. But if some truths are forever out of reach, that's not a defeat, it's just part of the deal. The universe gives us glimpses, not guarantees. Our job is to keep looking, keep questioning, and enjoy the absurd fact that we're even able to wonder about any of this at all. So, where does all this leave us? We've sifted through quantum fields, particles, dark matter, and even the philosophical shrug of the unknowable. Now we land on the questions we can ask, but just haven't answered yet. The known unknowns. The scientific equivalent of having all the pieces to a puzzle, but some jokers hidden the box lid. First, there's dark matter. We're pretty confident it exists. Galaxies simply don't spin the way they should without something extra holding them together. But we still don't know what it is. Could be a new type of particle, or maybe we're misunderstanding gravity. At this point, it's like having a flat tire and no idea if it's the rubber, the road, or just your terrible driving. Then there's dark energy, responsible for the accelerating expansion of the universe. Again, we're reasonably sure it's there, but what it actually is remains up for grabs. It could be a property of space itself, or a new force, or something so unfamiliar we've not got the vocabulary yet. Science is basically nodding politely and saying, "Interesting," while quietly panicking in the corner. The origin of life is another big one. We've got promising theories about how chemistry became biology. RNA worlds, hydrothermal vents, warm little ponds, take your pick. But we haven't nailed it down. Life may have started multiple times, all once, and clung on by luck. And if there's life elsewhere in the universe, it's been oddly quiet so far, possibly screening our calls. Consciousness, meanwhile, remains a puzzle that doesn't like being solved. Brains are made of matter, thoughts emerge somehow, but exactly how remains murky. Neuroscience has made progress, mapping regions of the brain, decoding dreams, even tricking people into thinking rubber hands are theirs. But the leap from electrical pulses to inner experience, that bit's still blurry. On the physics front, there's the search for a unified theory. We've got general relativity explaining gravity, quantum mechanics covering the small stuff. But the two don't get along, merging them into one tidy framework. Quantum gravity, string theory, loop quantum gravity has so far proved elusive. It's like trying to force two puzzle pieces together that look similar, but one's actually a crumb. We're also uncertain about the early moments of the Big Bang. Our models work well up to a fraction of a second after it all kicked off. Before that, things get speculative. Did the universe emerge from a singularity? A bounce from a previous universe? A fluctuation in a quantum field? Right now, all we've got is a very dramatic blank page. Still, science thrives on questions. The fact that we don't know is precisely what drives research, funding, and arguments over tea in university staff rooms. And while there's a great deal we still don't understand, the map is getting filled in, one oddly shaped piece at a time. Beyond the mysteries we know we haven't solved lies another category altogether: the unknown unknowns. These are the things we don't know that we don't know. Which sounds like something a manager says before cancelling your holiday, but is actually a serious scientific category. It's the space where surprises live, patiently waiting for us to trip over them. Throughout history, our biggest shifts in understanding have come not from answers, but from new kinds of questions. No one in the Middle Ages was wondering what an electron was. Electrons were busy doing their thing, but we didn't know we were supposed to be looking for them. The same likely holds true today. There are probably entire phenomena we haven't noticed yet. Take the discovery of radio waves. In the 1800s, no one was thinking, if only we could tune into invisible oscillations and send Morse code across the Atlantic. But once we found them, they revolutionized physics and communication. Similarly, the existence of microbes, tiny organisms causing disease, wasn't even a consideration until microscopes revealed the invisible zoo all around us. A real morale booster. In modern science, we try to leave space for these unknowns by asking open-ended questions and checking assumptions. Sometimes it works. In 1998, when astronomers were measuring how fast the universe's expansion was slowing down, they accidentally found it was speeding up instead. Cue dark energy, Nobel Prizes, and a lot of head-scratching. Unknown unknowns may also be hiding in our instruments. Our tools shape what we can detect. Build a better detector, and suddenly you're seeing particles you didn't even know existed, or not seeing ones you were quite sure should be there. It's a bit like checking the fridge 3 times for cheese, then realizing your glasses are in your pocket. Another hiding spot is our bias. We expect the universe to behave in certain ways. So if something doesn't fit, we may overlook it, reinterpret it, or assume the data's wrong. Scientific revolutions often start with someone saying, "Hang on a minute, that's odd." It's the most underappreciated phrase in all of science. Then, there's the possibility that some unknowns are simply too alien for our current way of thinking. Just as an ant doesn't lie awake pondering Wi-Fi, we might be blind to concepts that sit completely outside our mental toolkit. Not because we're not clever, just because we're shaped by evolution to notice only what helps us survive and find sandwiches. This leads us to consider something rather humbling. That mystery isn't the enemy of knowledge, it's the engine. The unknown unknowns aren't a barrier, they're a horizon. They remind us that, however far we've come, We've only just begun to notice what's out there. Or, as a physicist might put it, stay tuned. At the furthest reaches of our scientific understanding, there isn't a tidy fence or a thanks for visiting sign. Just a vague boundary where the known gives way to possibility. This is the edge of the map, the bit where, historically, we'd write, "Here be dragons." These days, we just call it further research required, which is arguably even more ominous. What sits beyond this edge? Well, we don't know. That's the point. But it's not empty. It's full of hints, loose ends, and tantalizing gaps. The Standard Model of particle physics, for example, describes nearly everything we see, except dark matter, dark energy, and gravity at the quantum scale. Not small oversights, really. Likewise, in cosmology, we can map the universe's expansion quite well, right up until the first moments after the Big Bang. After that, things get fuzzy. Our current theories can't yet explain how space-time itself started or why it exists at all. It's like owning a jigsaw puzzle with the middle missing, and no box picture. Then there's consciousness. Brains are made of matter. Neurons fire, chemicals flow. But how this results in subjective experience, what it feels like to be you, is still unknown. We understand the plumbing, more or less, but not the water pressure, so to speak. Philosophy students have built entire careers on less. Even time, that most basic ingredient of reality, resists full explanation. Is it fundamental, or does it emerge from something deeper? Can it flow backwards under certain conditions? Is the future already there, just waiting for us to catch up? The answers, if they exist, are currently hiding under a pile of equations no one fully understands. At the edge of the map, science does something slightly strange. It stops giving definitive answers and starts asking better questions. Not because we're giving up, but because that's often how progress begins. Admit ignorance, look carefully, and don't assume the dragons are just decorative. Of course, sometimes we think we've reached the edge, only to discover we were looking in the wrong place entirely. History is full of scientific blind alleys. The important thing is not to build houses there. Stay curious, stay suspicious, and always check your maths. This leads us to consider something rather hopeful. The edge of the map is always moving. As our instruments improve and our ideas evolve, today's mysteries become tomorrow's textbooks. The frontier isn't a fixed place, it's a process. And we're all part of it, whether we're peering through telescopes or just trying to understand what keeps the fridge light on. As we've seen, the universe comes with its own rulebook. Gravity pulls, atoms jiggle, stars explode on schedule. But here's the twist. Humans also write rules, just not quite the same kind. Scientific laws describe what nature does. Our laws, on the other hand, describe how we try to behave when dealing with it, especially when there's funding involved. Scientific knowledge doesn't float in a vacuum. It's shaped by people, with budgets, biases, and occasionally very large egos. Research decisions depend on ethics, politics, and cultural priorities. For instance, why did we put people on the moon before developing safe drinking water for everyone? Because priorities are complicated and sometimes questionable. Ethics is where science meets values. Just because something can be done doesn't mean it should be. Take cloning, gene editing, or artificial intelligence. All impressive achievements, yes. But they raise tricky questions. What are the risks? Who benefits? And who's responsible when it goes wrong? Which, let's be honest, it occasionally does. Peer review, transparency, and repeatability are the core tools that keep science honest. But even these aren't perfect. Papers get retracted, biases creep in. Some researchers have been known to massage their results a little, presumably in the same way one might adjust a bathroom scale after Christmas dinner. Then there's the issue of access. Scientific knowledge is supposed to be for everyone, but that's not always how it works. Paywalls, patents, and lack of education keep a lot of people out. The challenge is making sure science isn't just something done by experts, but something understood by society. This is particularly urgent when science influences policy. Climate change, vaccines, environmental protection, these decisions affect all of us, and they work best when the public trusts the science behind them, which means scientists need to speak clearly and politicians need to listen, ideally at the same time. Still, the fact we even try to do this is rather encouraging. No other species has ever worried about the consequences of its own curiosity. Elephants don't hold bioethics conferences. Dolphins don't submit grant proposals. Only humans ask, what are the rules, and how should we change them? This leads us to consider the future not just as a place we discover, but as one we shape. Scientific rules describe the universe as it is. Our rules ask what it could be if we're clever, cautious, and just the right amount of nosy. And that brings our journey to a gentle close. If you're still with us, you're welcome to drift off with another of our sleepy deep dives. Until then, rest well and good night.